Oh, I can't record.
That's okay. I'm doing it now.
The meeting host has to do it.
I'm doing it now.
Okay.
Is it just Marcia for now?
Oh no, we got a couple people on.
Yeah, there's Marcia.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll give everybody about 2 or 3 minutes so everybody can join in. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We're just giving a couple more minutes for some other folks to join in. So just hang tight. Give it 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll get started with introductions. Okay. I think we'll get started here just for the interest of time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Mayer. I'm the current president of PRSA Miami, and I wanted to thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us. It's a little bit crazy if you're here in South Florida. We're just starting to open up, so things are starting to slowly get back into business, but we wanted to take the opportunity to provide you with content and some of these virtual events that are helping people beyond the world of communications and public relations. So without further ado, allow me to introduce some of your hosts for today, your presenters for today. First, we have Rosemary Ravenel. She is the founder and chief strategist at RMR Communications Consulting. Rosemary is an accredited public relations professional. She's a media expert, an executive coach and public speaker. Rosemary founded RMR Communications Consulting and the Resonance Speaker training program to address gaps in presentation skills, public speaking, and media readiness among C-suite executives in bilingual and bicultural settings. For more than 2 decades, she was a senior corporate communications leader and spokesperson for several Fortune 100 companies, non-for-profit organizations, and agencies in New York and South Florida. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Next, we have Annette Malkin. Annette is the founder and principal of CultureWise Collective. Annette is a creative storyteller and brand builder with more than 17 years of experience specializing in consumer, lifestyle, and multicultural PR. She began her career in New York City and has helped some of the largest global brands, including Amazon, Tabasco, Buchanan's, and Tequila, Don Julio, very nice, and generated meaningful press coverage and sparked social conversations for each of these brands. Annette sits on the board of the Public Relations Society of America Miami chapter and recently helped launch our Independent Practitioners Alliance for PRSA, which is the first in our chapter history. And last but not least, we have Ted Miller. Ted is the founder and principal consultant for the newly formed Ted Miller Group, TMG, a strategic public relations and social media practice based in Miami, Florida. It has a focus on storytelling, content creation, and media relations. TMG works with a wide variety of innovators in the fields of technology and startups, fitness, travel, and accessibility. Before TMG, Ted was an associate vice president of PR and social media at Royal Caribbean and spent 8 years as a senior member of the corporate communications team at Apple. He's an advocate for the autism community in South Florida and serves on the constituency board of directors for the University of Miami Nova Southeastern University Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. Thank you all and welcome. I'm going to allow a couple more folks in the room, but take it away.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So let me, before we get into the next, into the first slide, if you just hold here, Erica, for a moment. Let me just go into a little bit that maybe we haven't really about enough because this sort of hit us very unexpectedly. Right? So the word crisis comes from, and it really has its roots in Sophocles and the Greek tragedies. But everywhere it has a meaning that is sometimes understood because it's really, crisis is a moment of decision. It's a pivot. It's a moment that if you make the right decision, it opens the doors of opportunity. It's very often as crisis is opportunity, but it's after a crisis hits, it's what you do next, what decisive step you take that will make the difference whether you will succeed or fail. And Tony Robbins said very famously, it's in your moment of decision that your destiny is shaped. And I think we're living it right now at every moment of the pandemic. There's actually 3 types of crises. One is one where you have a responsibility, where you have a product malfunction, a safety issue, a food safety issue in a restaurant, where something that you touched or you're responsible for failed. And we know famously many of those have been recorded in classic crises like the BP oil spill and many others. So there's some kind of relationship where you have your on something that failed, okay? The second one is an act of nature. We know it very well here in Florida, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, where there's an event that happens, but there's already been a playbook, right? There's already been some kind of historical event, some kind of learnings that have happened historically over time, where you have some measure of preparation. However, then there's the third, and we're living it right now, which is this pandemic, which caught us by surprise, where there been a precedent. The last even relatable event of a global nature was in 1918. We know that all the records were kept in pictures written by hand. We're really sort of navigating into very, very unknown waters, which is why interesting time communicators. So if I can have the first slide, where do we begin in terms of finding out what are best practices? And Erica, good. So here is a shot of something that was provided by RBB Communication. It's a very, very established, very successful, renowned agency based here in Miami. They did a survey, sort of a social listening and an analysis of communications that they received from 150 companies. And this was a good way to start our conversation today because they add we're getting in their inboxes, and many unsolicited. They were getting communications from large companies, global brands, local even babysitters, body shops, bakeries, and they were getting them direct email, from social. And so they took a look at what the sentiment was, what the tone was, and they sort of created a test of what works and what doesn't. What was correct in tone, what was understandable, what touched nerve, and what was relatable. And so of the 150 brand messages that they received directly in response to COVID-19, here's what they found. On what not to do column are messages that sell, at a direct sales pitch. You know, take advantage of opportunity while supplies last, right? Don't be the last to take advantage, we're still open. Things of that nature, which were rather opportunistic and hit the wrong tone. And under intent, sort of muddled messages, confusing subject line where it had COVID with other messages, where it's really of a muddled kind of, you read it and said, what was the purpose of all this? Lack of compassion, of concern, of hope, of human emotion, and of encouragement. And curiously enough, what RBB found is that the cruise lines were particularly responsible for these kinds of lack of compassion and lack of sentiment messages. Interestingly enough, they found that our major neighbors and the Royal Caribbean in particular, they cited as being insensitive to the to human feelings at this time. On the yes side, on what to do correctly, video was used very effectively. Personalized messages from the top, from the C-suite. In many cases, those were recorded in real life situations where their kids might be playing in the background or the dog was barking in the backyard. So that was very relatable. They had an optimistic tone, hopefulness, we're all in this together. They were relatable, there was no corporate speak, the language that was used was clear, simple, universally understandable. And it showed, of course, gratitude and recognition of the sacrifices being made by people in the front line, by the healthcare workers. And of course, it showed very, very strong value proposition as it relates to, we're here for the benefit of everybody, we're here to support you, we're here for the good and welfare of everyone. Could I have the next slide, please, Erica? So, next slide, please, thank you. So we're gonna get more into the tactics of what constitutes a good response kit. And obviously we're still in the thick of it. Actually, we're now into maybe the phase 1, which will call on maybe slightly different tactics and different messaging. So what are sort of the basic things that you need to have in your response kit? Well, certainly an official statement, right? An official statement that sort of explains what are you responding, how are you responding to the crisis? What is your organization doing to help its constituents? Sort of the hurt, how does it feel to be part of this community at this time? You want to have the basics. Are you operating? Are you closed? What is available? How do they get in touch with you? What are delivery options? What inventory do you have available? What safety measures are you putting in place, not only for the customer, but for your staff and your employees and your stakeholders? What date might you reopen? What is the status of your employees? Is everybody safe? You want to have a basic press release that you update as things evolve. And you want to have a war room. And the war room could be virtual war room. What does that mean? Maybe it's not a physical place, but it's a repository of information. It may be all your assets, all of your intelligence information, all of your materials that you can repurpose for use during this multi-phase period. It could, if you have the luxury of having a physical war room and you still have operations in your place of work, you might also have a dry erase board where you keep track of flow of messaging, and you have your editorial calendar and you have schedules. And basically it gives you a center of power where you can command all the activities. You want to have your social networks up to date. You want to be connected to your next door, your neighborhood hubs, your Facebook groups. You want to have a very, very active, robust social media plan. You want to have dedicated channels for people to get in touch with you, sort of the back, your WhatsApp, your Slack, your ways of having real-time communication at all times. You want to have pre-created, pre-populated landing pages for example, if you're now offering certain kind of services, if you're a restaurant and you have certain limited hours of operation, and you have a special menu for this time. You want to have a status page. Are you open? When are you open? Okay, so people know exactly where to go for that up-to-date information. And you also want to monitor social and even earned media. What is happening? What is your competition doing? You want to do social listening. What are people saying about you? What is the sentiment regarding your industry? And you want to also engage perhaps your competitors in some kind of collective industry-wide response to what is happening at this moment. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Annette.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'll go ahead and start off with the first slide. So what I wanted to talk to you about is those first 100 days. And as Erica mentioned, and as many of you know, South Florida is beginning its reopening, and these first 100 days are going to be very critical. You know, this pandemic caught us by surprise. Many of us scrambled to make that pivot and really tried to do everything we could to salvage our business and keep our staff. So with that being said, it's a good time to start drafting your playbook and really considering all the scenarios, having a plan in place, and be prepared for this social distancing 2.0 despite the uncertainty and the restrictions. As Rosemary mentioned, this is going to be happening in phases, so you should look at this guidebook as a tiered approach. Many experts are saying that there will be a resurgence, so putting this plan on paper could help you and your business, your organization in the future. And you're just gonna have to adjust your plan as you go. I think the biggest thing right now for organizations and brands and businesses to keep in mind is providing value to their patrons, to their audience, to their consumers, and those value and what they need. Responding to that need is going to evolve with every phase of this. So that's why your plan should remain and fluid. So Rosemary talked a little bit about this in terms of social listening and what RBB did, but you want to make sure that you're testing, listening, learning from what you're listening to, modifying, and then repeating. So do some social listening, hear what people need, and then again, how you can provide that value. You also want to remain agile. So there's going to be some trial and error. We don't know what to expect. There isn't any existing guidebook. We're really writing this as we go in real time. There's no point of reference, and there will be a lot of lessons learned. Now would be a good time to involve your entire staff. So really good ideas can come from anywhere. There's an abundance of information, and we each are kind of consuming different bits of information, different media. So you want to make your staff as part of coming up with the solution. It will really make them feel valuable, accounted, and motivated, especially if there are staff members that normally aren't at these decision-making tables. And it really sends the message that everyone's input is important. You know, they can each provide a different perspective, and it really promotes collaboration and a good way to kind of reemerge in this new reality. I think Rosemary talked a little bit about this as well in terms of a war room. Consider creating a task force. It could be overwhelming to try to kind of keep up with all the updates from the CDC, from the city, from the mayor, what's happening in the news, social listening. So create a task force, regroup on a regular basis, share your learnings, and you may find that this is a new way of working for you and your organization in the future. Another tip is to create an alliance. You know, you do not have to do this alone. You can create strategic partnerships. Those are an effective way to reestablish your value, to enhance your value, to raise more awareness. You can find partners that align with your brand positioning and really, it could be people, organizations, like-minded brands. And I have a few examples here. I have Other Half Brewery. They did kind of a call to action for breweries around the globe. They created the All Together campaign. That's a special brew. And last I saw, I think they have over 600 breweries around the world that have joined this alliance, and they're raising awareness and funds for the hospitality industry. So really keeping in mind their key stakeholders. Another one was Brands, and this was a coalition of entrepreneurs, of small businesses that came together, and they each pledged to give a percentage of their proceeds. So this particular coalition received a lot of media, more so collectively than they would have individually as brands. And they've raised over $3 million. And I'm sure this is something that began now, but that they will continue throughout different phases. You also want to note that established brands need to remain relevant, and they need to provide rich content for their consumers. So there's an opportunity, if you're a nonprofit organization or a small business, to partner up with some of these brands. You know, if you are approached by a company, by a brand, and you are an expert or a small business, I recommend that you do your homework and just see what their efforts have been since COVID, and see if they align with your organization mission or your brand values, and ask yourself, has their approach been genuine? Does the part seem organic? Moving on to the next slide. I encourage you to gather some global inspiration. So look at what similar organizations and companies are doing in other parts of the country and other parts of the world that are further along in their social distancing 2.0 journey, and ask yourself, will that work for my business? What can I glean from that? You know, and kind of see how you can apply that to your business model. But with that being said, now is the time to think local and act hyper local. And so really kind of looking at micro strategies. And, you know, Miami, South Florida is a very transient and global city. But as we emerge from this, I think we're going to really have to lean in on our local community. If you're an organization and you're looking at donors really want to support their local community and who's in their backyard. If you are a brick and mortar, then, you know, patrons are probably not going to be going very far as they emerge. Some of them may kind of wait it out and stay home and kind of see what happens. So for small business about this, you know, from a foot traffic perspective, and really thinking, you know, between that 5 to 10 mile radius. So you want to cater and you want to appeal to your local community, and your communication should focus on staycations, distractions, and value. The next tip I would have for you is don't flip the switch. Don't abandon what you've been doing so far in terms of going digital and creating those virtual experiences and creating those online connections. Keep it up if it's working. It's probably, if you're a local business, giving you more of a national footprint, more of a regional footprint. You know, you can ask yourself if this is something that you should perhaps add to as a permanent offering moving forward. So really kind of look at this more akin to the adjusting of a light dimmer, just because this shift is going to be more gradual. And while we get the green light to open up, it will be with parameters. And like I said before, many will be hesitant. And the last tip I have for you is to serve with gratitude. And I have here something that Ball and Chain has had on their website for quite some time. If you're not familiar with them, they are bar and restaurants in Little Havana. And I think it was smart of them to kind of have this early on. You know, they're offering 50% off as they reopen, and they were already thinking about the future. So they're kind of rewarding their loyal patrons that have supported them, and they're inviting you to come back, and they're confidently telling the patrons and even their staff that they're here to stay, and that they understand that folks are going through hardship. So they're extending that discount, and probably can't see from this picture, but it extends 180 days after reopening. So they're really offering it to everyone. And if you as an organization, that's not feasible for you, then maybe think about how you can extend that support to those that have, you know, shopped your business, that have supported you throughout this time. So is now a time to launch a loyalty program when you reopen? For those that are cultural organizations, what perks can you offer folks that maybe donated the funds of a canceled performance a few months ago as donations to your organization? If you offer memberships or season holders, what can you give back to those now as you reopen for those that renewed early? So it doesn't have to be something costly, just something exclusive, something of value. So a post-show Q&A, a reception with actors and directors if you're a cultural organization, some of those things to keep in mind. And now I'm going to pass it off to Ted.
Hey guys, and I apologize, it's raining where I am and I'm sitting outside, so if you hear raindrops or pitter patter in the background, that's probably what it is. So you can hop to the first slide, Erica. So I'm going to talk a bit about kind of strategies and tactics and some resources that are available. There's a lot of overlap that we've seen in kind of the discussion so far. But I think as we've heard so far, I think it's important to identify who your audiences are, who needs to be communicated to, what message, where, and from whom. I think who communicates is as important as what's communicated, whether it's at the top or it's someone kind of at the front lines on the support side. If it's a local business, obviously it would be the owner or the founder. I think it's important to look at kind of what assets and resources you currently have available. I think right now a lot of businesses are challenged that they've had to let go their either agencies or PR support or furlough workers, and in some cases you don't have that support system or those resources available that you would have before, or don't have the budgets to support that, or unfortunately in a lot of cases had to furlough workers that maybe took on some of those tasks that you had to before. So it's also kind of understanding where some of those gaps are and what some of that expertise or some of those skill sets that you need to kind of replace or kind of learn quickly. I think it's important, as we've talked about, and Annette just captured quite in depth, is kind of what are some of those important stories that you guys can create, that what are some of the important updates, initiatives, campaigns like the one with the breweries, other campaigns you can do on a local level with other businesses, something to give back, something to involve your community. I think a lot of times you kind of get into this right now where you're not quite sure how to approach things, so you want to almost like react and be reactive, but it's also a great time to be proactive and really leverage the rest of your team and others out there for inspiration to create some more proactive and meaningful stories. And in a lot of cases, you have some extra time to do that as well. So some of those ideas you maybe wanted to try before, it might be a good time to do that. Obviously, try to focus, don't try to do too much. I've seen some of my clients want to do everything and try 10 different things, but obviously when you try to do that, you're probably not putting the best effort into each one. So focus is also your friend. So maybe pick one or two key ideas and try to work on those first. Again, channels I think are important. How do you get that message out? But more importantly, what channels do you have available? What's the most natural to work on? If you haven't really had an Instagram presence, maybe now's not the right time to create something for Instagram, for example. But if you know engagement's high on Facebook, then obviously you want to put a lot of efforts towards how you communicate and some of that storytelling and communication you do on Facebook. So it's optimizing the channels that you have and maybe picking strategically which ones are going to have the most meaning and the most impact. And maybe let some of the other ones not necessarily be a priority for the time being. These channels can be very important to engage your community, to update customers, also to kind of launch new initiatives. And I think this one's probably really key, and we talked a bit about this earlier, but get buy-in from key stakeholders, whether they're internally executives, maybe it's key customers, clients, partners. It's better to plan with them because in some cases, they may have a different perception, whereas us as PR people may have to talk an executive down from maybe a great idea they had to drive sales or make an offer. And unfortunately, that may not align. So I think kind of starting the creative process and the storytelling process from the start and getting that buy-in is important. I think we also don't need to be afraid as PR professionals to push back when maybe a client or an executive maybe does have an idea that may be off tone. And I think it's our job to kind of direct them to why that may not be the best approach and what may be more of an effective approach. So I think that's kind of in the bucket of kind of taking inventory. I think it forces everyone to take a step back and kind of be more strategic and more focused and trying to leverage what they have to be more efficient. Next slide. This is more kind of on there you go, strategies. So I want to just kind of put together a few strategies, and many of these my group has had to engage with clients on. First and foremost, I think internal and customer communications is important, whether that be being transparent about the current state of things and updates on, say, a product or a business, maybe tips and advice. I work with a lot of companies that have customers that are in remote work, that have been shifted into remote work, and offering tips and advice about how to work in this new world is important for them. Any messages from executives resonate really well. And then I think as we move into this 2.0 world, be very clear about what is open and what isn't. I think we're already seeing a lot of confusion out there in terms of what's open, what's available, where do you have to wear a mask, where don't you? Is seating at 50% or 75%? I think it's also understanding like ongoing communication and clarification, and being clear as direct as possible. I think this is a great time, like I mentioned, for homegrown stories, for stories about customers, about impact, about shared initiatives. It's an opportunity to use the channels that you have. Media are overwhelmed right now. They're getting a lot of pitches from a lot of people. They're being put on beats they're not necessarily used to covering. So as much as you can do to create content yourself, or maybe collaborate with others on content, whether they're partners or clients, taking ownership of kind of your own storytelling, and not only that, but your own distribution of that story, is a skill that not only will be beneficial for today, but is obviously something we want to continue on moving forward. In my case, there's a number of my clients haven't really put a focus on their own storytelling, and really only look at earned media and pitching as their one distribution channel for their story. But I think it's forced them to kind of think and reset expectations about what can they do on their own channels, what can they leverage with partners, how do they create more of a conversation and more of a homegrown initiative. Thought leadership, as Rosemary mentioned, I think tone, messaging is extremely important. I think it's to really put together who are those key executives. Not everyone can go 24 hours a day. So who can kind of fill in those gaps? Who's a category expert? It's a great time to do media training right now because we do have time to do that. That can be done over Zoom. And then it's obviously being smart and strategic about getting executives out there. Don't be afraid to put them out there proactively if they can add to the story or have something important to say or contribute. But obviously don't put them out there if you know it's going to be a square peg in a round hole, or they might be approached or hijacked by a reporter to talk about something that maybe they don't want to talk about, they're not comfortable talking about. So be proactive, but also be smart about placement of executives, but don't be afraid to do so. And then like we talked about, the social listening is extremely important, whether that's on some of the social listening platforms, whether it's perusing through Help a Reporter Out, talking to reporters and producers just to kind of understand what some of their challenges are, what topics they're interested in. I think it's a great time to have background conversations and connect with reporters who maybe are sitting at home and aren't in their typical environment to bounce ideas off of colleagues. So I think that's also a great opportunity during this cycles to really focus on kind of research and understanding kind of where you can fit your story. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight a couple resources that I put down. We covered off some of the social listening tools already. But I think one that's been useful is Help a Reporter Out, which is from Cision. It's $19 a month. You get 3 updates a day across a variety of different categories. And in addition to kind of having opportunities you can submit pitches and sources for, it's also a great way to research what topics reporters are covering, what angles they're taking. Maybe it's some new contacts that you weren't aware of that you can pitch later on. But I think it really provides some perspective that you can then in turn share with your clients or your team. Muckrack is just a cheaper alternative to Cision. Nothing against Cision. I love Cision, but Muckrack is more affordable from a media and influencer list standpoint. It has a lot of the same features. Sidekick is a new service from Wander PR here in Miami that offers a very affordable package that helps companies without big budgets to pull media lists, do reporting to clients, submit their calendar listings, and there's a la carte services too. I think it ranges from anywhere in the $200 to $400 range per month. PR Web is a cheaper alternative to PR Newswire with a lot of the same benefits of distribution and reporting. Upwork for freelancers, for content creation and writing. Shoot in the Box is an interesting one from a company called Over Above. They're a content production agency in Connecticut, but they offer a product that basically gives you a shoot in a box. So if you're doing live streaming, executive interviews, live call-ins to a broadcast outlet, it provides you with the mic, the teleprompter, the stand, the lighting, everything you would need basically in a box to produce a great live or filmed package. And then on the back end, they do editing and graphic support, and it's very affordable. And then be your own producer. Leverage your own talents as an iPhone user, shoot your own video, ask your customers to share video, learn iMovie and the basics of editing. I think a lot of us have some time at home to work on some of that stuff, maybe if not if you have kids, but it's also a time to kind of test out your own skills or leverage others in your office that may have a skill set. Maybe they are a wedding photographer on the side. Maybe they do know how to shoot and edit on Visco or Instagram. Maybe they have a following. Maybe they're a videographer or have a friend that does so. And don't be afraid to put in those asks, because I think as we're seeing a lot of cases right now, kind of that raw, organic, at-home content, makeup free and everything is actually resonating really well when it comes to celebrities and personalities. And so don't be afraid to kind of be your own content shooter and editor. I think we're all able to do a lot more than we think sometimes. So that's kind of just a list of resources. I'm sure there's plenty of others, and I look forward to hearing from everyone else on the call and also from the fellow panelists about maybe other ideas there. But want to open it up to discussion and question and answer. We're here to answer any questions and have a conversation.
Thank you, Ted. If you guys would like, we could use the chat as a form to sort of start collecting questions from all of you, or just unmute yourself and raise your hand, and that way we can get a little bit of dialogue going. So, quick question. If you guys can raise your hand, how many of you, or a lot of you are not using your video, but are any of you here from nonprofits? Okay, I see Angeline. Thank you. Kristen. And do you guys have internal teams that are helping you maneuver through this time, or are you doing it yourself? I see Bonnie as well. And Sherry. Do you guys have help, or do you guys utilize an agency or a consultant to help you dabble with some of these things that the speakers have been talking about? Or you have board members? That's excellent. Okay. Wonderful. So Angeline, with your board members, do you find that it's been easier or more challenging right now in the last 2 months to sort of corral them and get them to really push for your mission? And feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh, hi, this is Angeline. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we found that our board, particularly those who are experienced in the PR arena, actually one of them is on this webinar as well today, and another one was the one actually that forwarded this workshop to me. So they've been really great about stepping up and supporting us in any way we need, and it's been a huge help.
And are you finding that your time is spent more on crisis management right now? What is your days looking like now that we're shifting to that 2.0 mentality, like Annette mentioned?
We are not currently in crisis mode. I don't feel. We kind of had been taking this opportunity to move things virtually. And like was mentioned earlier, you know, this is something that we will be continuing past the crisis anyway. So we're really just investing into our programs and how to make that and reach the clients. And then having that board help and assistance in terms of the communications and the PR side has really allowed us to do that.
I was going to jump in, Erica.
Go ahead.
This is Ted. I was just going to say, as someone who serves on a board for the Center for Autism at UM, we unfortunately had to let go our agency and then the contract, and the agency was responsible for quite a bit, from social media scheduling and posting to press release writing to some media relations. So the existing team that doesn't necessarily have that skill set. So obviously I'm helping, and we've got a few other people with PR backgrounds, which is important. But I think it's also, as I mentioned earlier, kind of picking a few things to focus on. And in our case, it was having to continue to serve 15,000 families across South Florida that had kids on the spectrum, and be able to continue to provide support and resources and therapy for those families. And I think through that process, learning that virtual has actually been a tremendously rewarding experience, providing a window into people's worlds. And we kind of then turned our focus on social, really promoting that virtual experience, both the results that we're seeing from it and the feedback we're receiving, but also using it as a way to promote some of these virtual experiences, which has actually expanded the number of families that have been aware of what card services are. And in fact, April was a record month in terms of onboarding more families to card services than ever before. So being able to tout that, it's been a win-win situation because it feeds the storytelling and the narrative, but it also continues to raise the visibility and awareness for what they're offering and get more people to sign up. So I think it's been beneficial, and so far we haven't missed a beat. Obviously there's long-term implications from a PR standpoint, but I think we're starting to look at how do we become more efficient with the use of what we have.
Yeah, if I could just, that regardless of whether you have resources or not, just communicate in any way possible. In any way, whatever tools, channels are available to you, just don't silent. I'd say that generally, as a rule of thumb, over communicate as much as possible. You know, wherever possible, I should. And let's not discard sort of more one-to-one, person-to-person, such as texting, for example, a call periodically to someone. So all those things do add up. And this is the time to strengthen those relationships where they matter most. As Ted just said, it have this extraordinary these virtual platforms at disposal. I think we can use them to keep our communities engaged.
I have a question for Annette. When making alliances, does it make sense to align with similar organizations, or maybe something a little different perhaps to attract new audiences, maybe something unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, without knowing which kind of organization you're referencing, I would say that this is a unique time where like-minded organizations can kind of come together and kind of stepping away from that competitive maybe mindset. Just because I think keeping your patrons first, thinking about them first, or thinking about, if you're a nonprofit, those that you advocate for, I think together you can make greater impact and really help to drive, you know, larger awareness for your shared mission, or whether it's a specific type of cultural audience, like if you're a theater, promoting a theater group. So I would say that it needs to feel right. It needs to complement your mission and your brand value. But I think now is a time to look at similar organizations and really create an organization. I'm also involved with the Arts and Business Council, and they have a lot of members within the cultural organization. So there may already be things that exist, but if there's not, it's a great opportunity for your organization to be the leader in that. And I think that also, you know, as being a leader within your category, within your industry, will go a long way. But really thinking about goodwill at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to prompt a question for the group, Erica. Just what are some of the biggest challenges that I guess folks on the call are seeing? What one area or two areas are you seeing the biggest challenge right now? Is it pitching media and securing stories? Is it trying to find that right fit? Is it producing your own content without resources? Like what are people finding? I'm just kind of curious.
Perhaps we can open the mics. It's a relatively small group. Love to hear. That's a great question, Ted. I think we need to have that perspective and to take advantage of what we have left.
Oh, well, this is Bonnie. I'm actually in the Tampa area, so thank you for opening this up to the other chapters. I appreciate it. Our organization's a little bit different. I'm with the American Board of Pathology, so my audience is really, we serve the frontline workers, we're physicians. So really my struggle is we're trying to make sure we're able to meet their needs. We do their certification testing and they need that to work. So that's been a struggle. So to support what you said earlier about there are other certification boards. So I spend a lot of time trying to make sure I can see what everybody else is doing. And then just so that we're kind of not giving an even playing field because they're in a very high stress situation and yet, you know, they need our services. So, so for me, that's, you know, I'm a one woman team. So I spend a good part of my day doing that.
Thanks for sharing. I see one question on the chat about knowing when and what to pitch. I think that's where doing some social listening, maybe following a group of reporters on Twitter, looking at the Daily Helper Reporter Out posts in terms of what reporters are looking for. Are they looking for products? They're looking for companies, customers to speak with, personal trainers. I think those resources for not a large financial commitment can at least tell you which reporters are covering what topics, what they're looking for, so that when you do go out with a pitch, that you're more confident that it is the right fit for the reporter. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of reporters are not only disrupted from their day-to-day job and they're covering coronavirus stories daily, but sometimes they're thrown into other areas that they're not necessarily experienced at. So as much as we can help them as PR professionals by researching and kind of understanding what they've covered over the past week, maybe it's different than the beat they typically cover. How do we help them do their job more effectively and identify great stories? So if any of the other panelists want to add, I think that's.
Yeah, let me just add that the media, as we know, is just deluged with pitches, right? And they've had cutbacks as well, you know, in newsrooms in terms of you know, unfortunately. But I'd say, yeah, this is the time to document. This is the time. Maybe this is not a story right now, but you can assume a leadership role in your industry in the future. This is going to be a story for a long time. And as I said earlier, it's where we're writing basically the textbook on this because we've never experienced collectively, you know, on the planet something of this magnitude. So if you're doing public service work, if you're doing volunteer work, if you've retrofitted your store, you know, to deal with local requirements for safety, document everything. Save emails that you've gotten from happy customers who are engaged with you. All these little things, all these little nuggets, I think can come together as a wonderful set of assets for you to repurpose that in the future.
Yeah, I would say, Rosemary, just to build on what you were saying, like just take a human-centric approach, you know, when you're emailing them. I believe recently Cision, which Ted mentioned, did a webinar on kind of like the state of the media and a response that for many of us PR people that are in constant contact with the media that took us by surprise is media is actually not opposed to the check-in or the chit-chat. Normally they want you to kind of get straight to the point, but everyone's going through this and they're going through this and they have children and they're trying to juggle it all. So, you know, maybe one day you'll get a snarky response because who knows what they're going through, but don't let that dissuade you. And I think if you just really approach it in a friendly tone and just kind of caveat, you know, I'm not sure if you're covering these kind of things right now, if it's not COVID related, because that's a question that I saw a lot, like how do I know if media is covering non-COVID related stories? That's the biggest challenge because some folks have clients that want to operate business as usual. And if that's the case, I would say if you are in the PR profession, just to follow your gut. And if it doesn't feel right, you know, counsel your client. Don't just kind of go with it. You know, you are the professional. And if it isn't an arena, you know, that you are day in and day out, if you're not the PR person, but all of a sudden you've assumed that role as a small business owner because you're wearing multiple hats, you know, just keep it friendly, keep it light. And like Ted said, do your homework.
I think it's also being someone that can speak more than just about your company. I think offering kind of perspective. I see the note coming in from Sherry about just, is it okay to pitch around Memorial Day? And we see a lot of stories. I think it's not, instead of maybe hawking your product for Memorial Day, maybe talk about what are some of the things that people should be aware of, or what are some of the trends out there, and kind of be more of kind of a thought leader and an expert with something that maybe even mentions others in this space or competitors, and just kind of be that trusted source for a reporter. I think that's valuable. Also helping them do their job. If you have great B-roll or content, anything you can do to help reporters. They're disconnected from their video production folks, their editors. et cetera. So as much as you can do to kind of feed them great content that can be easily flipped into a press article or included in a news story, I think that puts a major spotlight on maybe gaps that some companies have on content and thinking about producing great content that can be evergreen and used. Or maybe it's just raw content that you shoot with your iPhone, but just making the job of the reporter easy is also helpful.
And you can also utilize social media, just jumping in, to share your message. If you are hitting walls with media, they're just not responding to you. Use your news blast, your social media pages, LinkedIn, to share those stories and write them in a way that a reporter would look at it and sort of visualize everything. Right now, things are getting a little more lax and reporters are going out and shooting video, but iPhones are perfectly acceptable. So if you shoot videos horizontally, it's easier for them to air them. So you can kind of become your own reporter. Your board members become your spokespeople, and they also become your subject matter experts. So look within your organization to see who are the best people to speak on your behalf and practice with them what we call media training, because you don't want to throw them out there and then they feel horrible because they didn't do a great job for you. But I think social media is a great way to sort of get those feelers out and get the story out and get it shared. The more visual, the better. A post just with verbiage doesn't go as far as a video or a photo.
Yeah, and I was going to say one more thing, Erica, too. It's a great point. One example with one of my clients is they were kind of struggling, like, why are we not getting coverage for some of these initiatives we're doing? They're very important initiatives. We're not getting the word out. Like, media aren't covering it. It's like, it's a great initiative. Like, you're helping small businesses. You're making it easy for them to sign up for small business loans. Great. Like, we can do as much as we can to pitch reporters. But so what we ended up doing is creating a Slack channel that included the entire company, and we called it Thunderclap, which is basically like we just posted this great blog post or this new initiative. Everyone in the company, here's the tools you need to go post it on your social media channels on LinkedIn. So it's like sometimes you have to do, or if it's trying to reach small businesses, then maybe you, instead of trying to push all resources, being stressed out about proactively pitching for earned media, maybe you also do a small targeted LinkedIn buy to get the news out there, because ultimately the goal is to share that great initiative you've created to help small businesses. But if they're not getting the message, then it's kind of just sitting there on an island, and you've gone through the effort of putting together a great initiative and a great idea and some great content that's not being used, or in this case, great tools that are extremely valuable to businesses and lenders. So you have to think about getting more creative with what you have. But that's just one example I wanted to share that we created with one of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ted, and just to add, in terms of thought leadership, I work with a nonprofit organization. They're education advocates based out of Boston. And during this time, we ramped up their thought leadership. And when it's appropriate, we will pitch those written by the organization leaders as bylines. I think there's been an uptick of opinion piece submissions, right? Because if they're not getting coverage through editorial, they're trying to do that through the byline. So that is become a little bit more competitive, but just really becoming a resource, right, to your audience and those that you advocate for. And one of the things I love the organization did over there, they do cater to the Hispanic market, and they saw white space in their community in Boston where information was not readily available in Spanish. So they've partnered with the Spanish newspaper in Boston to produce and amplify more Spanish language content, mostly for the parents. So they're doing Facebook Lives, and it's cross promotion. It's raising awareness about the organization. It's showing their goodwill, but it's really providing value to the community that they advocate for. And I think it was, really smart on their part to kind of form that alliance and their partnership. So it's also something that perhaps you can apply to your organization, kind of looking at that white space.
Yeah, to add to that, Annette, generally even Spanish language media is relatively underserved. The Hispanic community is being underserved at this time. So if you can adapt your materials to Spanish in a simple way, if you're doing a video, you can do just basic simple captions. It's going to make a big difference, particularly if the Hispanic community is part of your target audience. But Hispanic media, particularly in South Florida, is generally not receiving the same number of pitches that the mainstream market is. So there might be a white space opportunity for you there.
Yeah, and then two more things I wanted to add just really quick. I know we're kind of running up against time, but something also to keep in mind, as Annette mentioned, is don't be afraid of partnerships. I think look at peers in the industry that maybe have great audiences on social, and maybe look for an opportunity to do a Zoom call with the two founders of the two companies to reach a broader audience. Or I just had one of my clients, GitLab I don't know if you guys know GitLab, they're an all remote company, a couple thousand employees. They've been getting a lot of publicity in the business and tech media because they've established themselves as a thought leader. And I had one of my clients interviewed on one of their webcasts on video that's running on YouTube, and they're promoting it across their channels, and like trying to look at different types of audiences, maybe through partners, other peers in the industry, and vice versa. Like if they have a great blog post, share it on your channels, and vice versa. So there's a lot of creative ways you can get out there and work with other organizations to cross promote content, collaborate on content, look for opportunities you maybe didn't have available before, participate in a podcast, etc.
Any other one or two final questions before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to say, Erica, before we run out of time, prsa.org has wonderful resources, lots of COVID-19 related resources. So I would urge you all, even if for those who are not members, this might be a good opportunity to tap into these vast reserves of information and guidance.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you all. Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Ted. For those of you that are not familiar with PRSA, we have these monthly events. They're usually geared towards PR and communications professionals, but there's things that you can always learn. Our next event is actually on Thursday. We're having a webinar on TikTok, and it's specifically for different types of businesses, from dentist office to travel agencies to restaurants, on how to utilize TikTok. It's the up and coming thing, and the numbers are blowing up since everybody's been home. It's the new entertainment that we have. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more on how you can balance that in your marketing curriculum, we hope you can join us. So thank you, everybody, again, and talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thank you.